Hello.
Hello, Marlon. I'm Rosalind Crisp. I'm from Australia and I'm in Berlin. I have been invited by the HZT to do a workshop with the students from the BA course and show a presentation 2 nights, tomorrow and Sunday.
Yes. And what is the course about? If you can contextualize a little bit what you're doing with this perhaps interrelated actions, perhaps a choreography or a work that you're presenting.
Well, the mornings I'm doing a class, an open class, which took me the first week to kind of sort out what was the best approach, and I've taken the approach of football coach. It seems to be most appropriate here. So basically I'm kind of scaring them into embodiment. We do a lot of yelping and leaping and running and slapping and getting them to activate, because otherwise I think they would probably just lie down and go to sleep. Students they really seem to want to do sleep.
Yes.
So waking them up, exciting them, getting them in their attention into their body and using their weight and their breath and their sensations, having fun. And then the afternoon is a workshop, and I'm going to sneeze. Oh, we've got that on video.
There we have, yes.
The afternoon I work with transmitting as best I can in this short time we have, 3 weeks, my tools for producing movement, which are also tools for perceiving movement being made, and they are quite demanding, and really they are about the dancers becoming more present in each moment of their decision making. And because the tools, for example, they're always initiated by touch, not all of them, most of them. So one of them, tool number 1, actually they all have numbers, they go up to 64 currently. Tool number 1 is to bring attention to one surface of the body, and the dancer moves towards the touch. That's tool number 1A. And the toucher keeps changing the size of the surface touched and where it is on the body and how long they stay in contact, and the responder explores the beginning, how they initiate the beginning, what their breath's happening with their breath. Is there more tone in that surface than the rest of the body? How far do they follow it? Do they speed up or slow down? So there's a lot of compositional elements that I keep feeding in through other processes. But basically the tools are about being able to shift attention around the body and source movement from any part of the body. Of course, this takes years. So 3 weeks is it's quite challenging, really. Yeah. So again, I have to get out the whip every now and then so I can move.
Yes, and but at the same time, is this kind of kind of agitating them or exciting them into embodiment, and or forcing them. Let's say facilitating the environment, the context for them to explore. Yeah. And but how, through your experience, have you come up with this perhaps focus on attention?
Yeah.
Because we have,
it's
I
all
took
about
the classes.
Attention.
Yeah.
So you took some classes.
Yeah, it's been great.
It's all about attention. And so one of the things, for example, I give an example. There is one dancer who is a fantastic dancer. She, in a traditional sense, she's very well trained. Her legs go up over her head, and she can do anything. And when she's working with these tools, she uses them to show us how she can do anything. And I keep saying, well, look, if you take the next part of the choice before you finish with the last one, so what we're doing then is we're following your attention as your decision is being made, rather than you taking that movement right to the end where we know it's going to go. You recognise it, we're going to recognise it. Something goes to sleep, start this movement. Can you see? She starts this movement with the leg, and I go, I know where it's going. It's going up there, because that's why she wants to show me how high the leg can go. So, as soon as you recognise it, take another bit of the body or go in a different direction. So I'm getting her to work with unfinished pathways that come from the tool. Perhaps this one I was just explaining. So that her attention is pushed back into that present moment of where am I now? Where am I now? Where am I now? Where's my breath now? Which part of the body's leading now? And the last few years I've got very obsessed with beginnings. So this not finishing thing, so this prioritising where it starts from rather than the pathway that's made or arriving, so that the attention keeps being in the birth of the thing, the beginning of the thing, not in the pathway that's made. Yeah. So in a way, I don't really care what happens with the movement. In a way, I try to train them to be irresponsible for the movement that's created, but highly responsible for where it's starting from.
And how you recognize that? How do you recognize it because there is this, of course, we also learn to observe and our own attention when we see it. It's also because a lot of we also have trained the sensibility of when you're not in the present, or how do you see those shifts? Because a lot of people would love just to see just that leg go up.
Yeah, well, when you've seen it a few times, it's not very, it's a question of aesthetic, and it's also a question of, like she said to me one day, oh, it's anti-virtuosic, this work. And I said, no, it's another kind of virtuosity. It's a virtuosity of attention. And, and that's an aesthetic thing. I'm much more interested in following the mind in the body, the intelligence of the body, deciding which, rather than someone attached to show me what their leg can do. It's just an aesthetic thing. I just find it boring. It's like I'd rather watch a racehorse.
Yes, and then
I want to look at prowess.
Yeah.
Technique.
Yeah. And how do you place that we talk a lot of, or something after the classes, and how do you place that in the certain historical context of what can be your influences, or if I say, well, how is this embodiment now? What kind of body do you construct, and where that comes from, or do you design with them?
My influences, well, they're multiple, of course, and a lot of them I've forgotten. But I've done a certain amount with Lisa Nelson. We had invited her to Australia a few times. I was trained at the European Dance Development Centre as a guest student. I was only there for a year, but it was a really important year for me in '91. So there I met, who was there? Mary Fulkerson had a big influence on me. She was completely mad and wonderful. Her kind of branch of release technique. There was also Lisa Krauss and Tony Thatcher and Eva Karjak, who I already knew, Stephanie Skura and others who came from New York, who had all sorts of they just broke down everything that I thought dance was. And I spent years after that kind of delving through that material. And then Jennifer Monson, we invited her to Australia a few times, so I sort of got in touch with the kind of Skinner work through her, secondhand, sort of through her, and other things that she'd explored and learnt with Yvonne Meyer, who's someone I just adore watching. And Julian Hamilton, he came. I wasn't that involved in his work, but another person. And I suppose one of probably the biggest teacher for me has been the studio. And in Australia, where I was until 10 years ago, I moved to Paris 10 years ago, but in Australia there are probably 3 or 4 theatres that program dance regularly in the whole country. So she, don't wait for a gig. So I had my own studio and I used to go in there every day, and I went in there for 20 years, every day into the studio, working on my own or with other dancers, and then these, foreign people coming. And I remember Lisa Nelson coming to Australia and saying, "You Australians, you're so resourceful. If someone comes with something for 2 weeks and then you live off it for the next 3 years until the next person arrives." So, and I think, this kind of appetite for exploration was developed there, and also following what I love, like dancing and distilling stuff from dancing. What am I doing now? Following that, oh, can I name it? Keep doing it, keep doing it. Finding a way to kind of catch something of it as a choreographer, but not eventually not catching movements, but catching processes. And then I start to try and name them and teach them. And of course they intersect with things I learned. You know, where does all this stuff come from? And the other thing is that I'm Australian and I grew up in the bush. And, you know, there's a kind of like that, you know, playing in the class. I love that. I mean, Germans are so serious and, you know, like slapping them around and getting people to laugh. And it releases stuff, you know, and then they can do things and their energy's awakened. And so there's a whole lot of influences, to do with growing up in the country and being isolated for 20 years and being in a studio every day for 20 years and having these odd influences coming from postmodern, mostly American postmodern work after, you know, 10 years of bad ballet. Then the school and then the last 10 years I've been in France and I have a company there and the dancers there are extraordinary. And there are two who worked with me in every show for the last 7 years and they are amazing. And so and I learn from them now actually.
And how do you then how do you place your work now in a context that I would say presents this kind of different layers, you know, conceptual dance and a strong influence to it, identifying ideologies or psychologization, and sometimes not even people have panic to call improvisation something that we learn as improvisation.
Well, you know, often I find myself in the position of defending dance as opposed to theatre or whatever. And like it depends where I am. It's so different in different cities. Like Berlin, dramaturgy is big. You know, dance theatre is the history here, and everybody has a dramaturge. And I don't know anything about dramaturgy. You know, I like a dramatic situation, but for me it's composition or it's communication. So there's a structure in this work with the students that I think takes them and the audience on a kind of journey. Something happens. There is a drama in it, but decisions are made through shift of dynamic or the need for kinesthetic. It's dramatic, but it's composition for me. So, and the thing about the thing I suppose that I always feel is that the body is often used in service of another idea. As an object in a work, and for me it's a subject. So I feel very connected to that kind of postmodern history where the body, the material, is meaningful. It doesn't have to refer to anything else. It's not about anything else. I don't need to explain it. And I think it's also not abstract. It's deeply human. So, and some people in France say I have this kind of connection between, you know, expressionism and postmodernism, where it's very human, but it's also not about a story or about a psychology. It's about the movement. But this thing about improvisation, I mean, I don't talk about it that much because I think it's totally misconstrued, and improvisation is not one thing. There's contact improvisation, there's a whole world, there's the kind of, you know, scored improvisations where you don't tell people what to do, but you say go to there in 5 minutes. Or the stand-up comedy, you know, there's all sorts.
There are kind of these generative environments that are created.
And mine, I suppose, if I have to put a label on, is choreographic improvisation, because these ways of initiating movement from different parts of the body and constantly sourcing where you're coming from, or shifting the attention around the body, or slowing down or speeding up, or adding a certain amount of tone, or releasing the tone and then seeing what you're looking at, and then following a leg over there, or it's deeply choreographic, and it rewrites your connections in your body. And people who work with me over a few years, like I say to them, you have to pay someone to get rid of this. You can't get it out. That's how we learn, you know. So it's choreographic in that sense.
And does just to finish, and just I would like to. I think it's also very important for me, or it's becoming figure a lot of the dancing body and the aging body, and so I really, how do you approach that? Because I think there's something very beautiful that is happening, that a lot of the people who had been working in this approaches of, we are all aging, and everybody's, but I feel like there is something quite important there to perhaps understand, or how do you approach that? But you also told me that you're working in a piece with someone in Australia that is kind of an older person.
Well, I think the legacy, the thing that I remember this years ago, the Americans were the first to be old dancers, apart from, of course, the Japanese. But just in my lineage, there's so much focus on youth and the body, and Australia is also obsessed with sport and the beautiful body, and many, countries are, because that's how the capitalism works, keep selling the youth and keep making people try and be younger, and so there is a huge focus on youth, I think, and as if somehow there's something a little bit pornographic about it. And the thing I loved about the Americans that I've met is they kept dancing till they were old, because that, for me, that was a real shift where, Simone Forti or Deborah Hale, people, it's not about, for me, it's not about how high the leg goes.
High jump.
It's about where your attention is when you're shifting or moving. Everything is dance if we pay attention to it. So, and what I love watching old people perform is they're so rich, they're so full, they're just saturated with sensation and experience, and this is palpable. So, and for me, I'm 54 and I just keep dancing, and the dance just keeps adjusting to me, and I have some really loud, fast rock and roll pieces, and I suppose, I'll stop doing them soon, but I don't know. And my interest, if I keep following my interest, then it takes me to the work that my body can do. I'm not trying to force it to be anywhere. And I think this economy that we learn as we get older is so great. It's something that those poor young people don't know. They don't know how not to force,
I think
not forcing, using the energy you've got. This is just, and then you're really, there's a presence there.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is a very nice ending to continue.
Great.
Thank you.